Chosen by the stars and burdened with a celestial legacy, a lone warrior must defend the fragile balance between light and shadow. This is a story of sacrifice, courage, and destiny. This is the tale of the Lightforged Warden. The forest, sprawling and timeless, whispered with the secrets of the earth. Its towering pines reached skyward like solemn guardians, their needles glittering faintly in the soft glow of dusk. For me, this secluded grove was a sanctuary, a retreat to remember my late father. He had been a swordsman, a masterful warrior whose skill with the blade was the stuff of legend in our village. His lessons, always given with a quiet authority, echoed in my mind even now. I remembered watching him practice at dawn, his katana moving like liquid fire, cutting through the air with precision and grace. My father had died in the Great War, defending our homeland with the honor and courage he always spoke of. This forest was one of the last places we visited together, and its silence felt like the closest thing to hearing his voice again. The flicker of a modest fire provided my only company, its shadows dancing like phantoms against the surrounding trees. As the evening deepened, I tilted my head skyward, losing myself in the uncountable stars that painted the heavens. Then it happened. A streak of fire carved through the sky. For an instant it outshone the moon, blazing brilliantly before vanishing beyond the tree line. A low, resonant rumble followed, shaking the forest floor. My heart pounded in my chest, a primal fear clawing at the edges of my mind. It had to be a meteor, I thought. Perhaps a fragment of some celestial event, or a star breaking apart. Whatever it was, it had landed nearby. Curiosity gripped me, but caution held me in place. Stay put, I murmured to myself, gripping the edges of the log I was sitting on, as though it could anchor me in reality. I didn't want to wander off and lose my campsite in the dark, so I decided to wait until morning to investigate. Hours passed, my unease growing heavier with each crackle of the fire. Then I felt it, an unnatural stillness that froze the air around me. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, and a chill crawled down my spine. I turned, and there it was. Emerging from the shadows beyond the firelight stood a figure unlike anything I'd ever seen. Tall, impossibly so, with opalescent skin that shimmered faintly in the flickering light. It had large, almond-shaped eyes that seemed to pierce through me. The being radiated exhaustion, but also something else. An otherworldly gravitas that made it impossible to look away. My breath hitched, every instinct screaming at me to run, but my legs refused to move. The creature didn't advance. Instead, it lowered itself slowly to sit by the fire, its movements deliberate and measured. Its silence was deafening, an unspoken presence that pressed on my chest. Despite its alien form, I felt no malice, only an overwhelming sense of purpose and weariness. You're not from here, I managed to stammer, my voice barely a whisper. The being's gaze softened, as if acknowledging the truth of my words, though it remained silent. My mind raced with questions, but fear and awe kept them locked behind clenched teeth. The crackle of fire was the only sound, each spark and pop magnified against the oppressive quiet. The tranquility shattered abruptly. A second fiery streak tore through the sky, this one darker angrier and more chaotic. The impact came seconds later, slamming into the earth with a deafening explosion that snuffed out the fire. The forest plunged into darkness, the air growing thick with an unnatural weight that made my skin crawl. From the direction of the crash emerged a shadowy entity, its form a writhing mass of darkness that seemed to drink in the faint starlight. Unlike the first visitor, this presence exuded pure malevolence, each of its movements a calculated expression of predatory intent. My legs finally obeyed my instincts, stumbling backward as the entity advanced, but I had nowhere to go. The opalescent being rose to its full height, its dimming radiance flaring. It stepped protectively in front of me, a shield against the encroaching darkness. A sudden brilliance erupted from its body, illuminating the forest in a silvery glow. The shadow creature recoiled, emitting a guttural hiss that sent a chill down my spine. Then, the battle began. The light being and the shadow entity collided with a force that sent shockwaves through the earth. The air crackled with unearthly energy as the two forms intertwined in a violent dance of creation and destruction. I was paralyzed, unable to look away from the clash of opposites unfolding before me. Blinding flashes lit up the forest, and each deafening impact sent tremors through the ground beneath me. The light being's opalescent skin began to dim with each exchange, while the shadow creature's form flickered erratically, as though struggling to maintain cohesion. Their battle reached a fever pitch, the very air vibrating with their power. Finally, with a desperate surge of energy, the light being drove the shadow entity back, its form blazing brighter than ever. The shadow emitted a shriek, a sound that clawed at the edges of sanity, before dissipating into the light. The light being staggered, its once luminous form now scarred and dull. It turned to me, and for the first time I saw the depth of its weariness. Slowly it approached, each step heavy with effort. It reached out a trembling hand and pressed something into the earth at my feet. A soft glow spread outward, and as I looked closer I saw an object taking shape, a smooth, crystalline seed. "Protect," the being whispered, its voice an echo that reverberated through my chest. Before I could ask what it meant, the being's form dissolved into a cascade of luminescent particles, drifting skyward before fading into the darkness. I crouched, reaching for the seed. The moment my fingers touched it, a pulse of energy surged through me. My vision blurred as memories not my own flooded my mind. An ancient tree spanning galaxies, its roots weaving through worlds, in a ceaseless struggle to preserve balance against an encroaching void. The seed was a fragment of that tree, a vessel of its power, and a link to something infinitely larger. The forest was silent, oppressive. I sat there, hand cradling the seed, my mind racing. I knew I could never return to my old life. The seed was more than a gift. It was a responsibility, one that tethered me to a vast and unknowable struggle. As dawn approached, I packed my belongings and began my journey out of the forest. Each step felt heavier, as though the shadows themselves clung to me. Then from the corner of my eye, I saw it, a shifting darkness at the edge of the trees. My heart sank. The shadow creature had returned, reborn, its form coiling and twisting like a living nightmare. Panic seized me as it surged forward, faster than before. The seed pulsed violently, a resonance that seemed to match the rhythm of my heartbeat. I stumbled backward, bracing myself for the inevitable impact. But instead of helplessness, the seed's energy erupted, light coalescing in my hands. As the glow faded, I found myself holding a katana-like blade, its crystalline structure pulsating with life. Its blade was long and slightly curved, with veins of light coursing through it like flowing rivers. The hilt, wrapped in glowing tendrils, was warm to the touch and seemed to hum with quiet resolve. The creature lunged, and I swung the blade instinctively. It cleaved through the shadow, a burst of radiant energy trailing its arc. The entity screeched, recoiling as the light burned through its form. My heart raced, adrenaline and awe flooding my senses. The shadow circled, wary now. I held the blade steady, its warmth pulsing in time with the seed's energy. When the creature struck again, I met it with a flurry of strikes, each swing driving it back. The weapon felt like an extension of myself, its movements fluid and precise, as if guided by something greater than instinct. The battle stretched on, each exchange testing my resolve. The shadow grew more frantic, its attacks wild and desperate. With a final, defiant roar, I raised the blade high and drove it downward, releasing a cascade of light that engulfed the creature. It writhed and screamed before disintegrating into nothingness, the forest falling silent once more. I collapsed, the blade dissolving into wisps of light as the seed's warmth steadied me. My hands trembled, the enormity of what had just happened sinking in. The shadows might have been defeated, but I knew they would return, and when they did, I would be ready.